April 23rd, 2024, regular meeting of the Santa Barbara City Council. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Recording in progress.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Here.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez. I'm sorry, Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Here.
And Mayor Ross.
Here. All right, very good. And you have a ceremony item to read?
Yes, item 1, Donate Life Month, April 2024.
My friend Priscilla.
Hello.
This is Donate Light Month, April 2024. Whereas National Donate Life Month was first observed in April of 2003 and has since been observed in communities across the nation to increase awareness of life-saving organ donations and also to honor organ donors and recipients. And whereas organ, eye, tissue, marrow, and blood donations are recognized worldwide as expressions of life-giving compassion to those in need, and anyone can register to be a donor regardless of age or medical conditions. And whereas more than 110,000 individuals nationwide, including over 23,000 Californians, are currently on the National Organ Transplant waiting list with their health in limbo as, sadly, 17 people on average die daily while waiting. And whereas broad outreach is critical as the need for donated organs is especially urgent within the Hispanic, Latino, and African American communities, and whereas last year organ donors saved more than 46,000 lives, the most ever, which is why it is so important for people to realize that a single person's donation of heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, pancreas, and small intestine can save up to 8 lives, and tissue donations can save and heal over 75 others. And whereas Santa Barbara residents, along with all Californians, can sign up to be organ, eye, and tissue donors at the California Department of Motor Vehicles, and whereas prospective donors are encouraged to join the donor registry at www.donatelifecalifornia.org or done, D-O-N-E, vida, V-I-D-A, california.org, Spanish, and visit livingdonationcalifornia.org to register for living kidney donations. Now, therefore, I, Randy Rouse, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby proclaim April 2024 as DMV Donate Life Month in the city of Santa Barbara and encourage community members to consider registering as donors when applying for or renewing their driver's licenses or ID cards at the California DMV. Nice to see you. A photo op. Don't take a picture of this because we put the wrong date down on this proclamation.
Nobody will notice.
I had to fake it.
Nobody will notice. Do you want to come in this
Okay,
side?
would you like me to side the sacred circle here and have a photo with
I
you?
know you've never done it before.
I know. I feel so insecure out here.
Thank you very much.
So you want to go first?
Would you like to say a few words?
Hi, I'm Priscilla Marcus, and I'm one of the Donate Life One Legacy ambassadors and have been for many years. 16 years ago, over 16 years ago, I had a liver transplant that saved my life. And after being on the waiting list for about 3.5 years, and gradually declining in health, in those last 16 years have been my bonus life. I figure if things are getting too overwhelming for me, or I just remember that it's all part of it and I'm in for it all. But since then, my older son had a daughter who's now 11, and my younger son graduated from UCSB and got married, and now has a little son that's just over a year, so I'm very, very happy to be here and honored to be here to accept this proclamation as a living in my bonus life. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, thank you. This proclamation this weekend will go down to Los Angeles for the annual Run Walk, along with other proclamations. And then after that, it'll end up at the DMV in Santa Barbara, so people in the city will see it. At the Run Walk this year, or last year, I was honoring a lady whose kidney I have 9 years ago. This is Vivian Boutel. Myself and her family, we walk wearing her shirt to honor her. The other things that are going on in my world is Vivian's, not only did she save my life, she saved another person's, 4 other people's lives, someone else's kidney, the heart, the liver, and the lungs. So things are going very well in my world for the last 9 years. One other thing, just so you guys know from the broad brush, while the DMV does 97% of all the pink dots in California, California last year changed the rules so that every time you do your state income tax, which is annually instead of now with DMV every 5 years, you'll also be asked the same questions. So more of a customer awareness, so things will happen. Anyway, we do thank you for this and appreciate all your help.
Thank you. And by the way, Mr. Burns, if you'd like to visit Holly on the way out, she can get you the corrected version of that proclamation.
I'll just use some white out.
Okay, with that, Madam Administrator, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Mayor, no changes.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll go to the consent calendar. You have some items to read, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 2, introduction of an ordinance authorizing Airport Patrol to join peace officer standards and training. Ordinance introduction, recommendation the council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by adding section 2.12.035 regarding Airport Patrol peace officer standards and training participation, and accepting the requirements of California Penal Code sections 13510, 13512, and 13522 relating to the recruitment and training of peace officers for the Airport Patrol. Item 3, authorize a fund transfer for creek property restoration at the De La Vina Bridge Replacement Project resolution. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Resolution 23076, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 to transfer funds from the Creek Fund to the Public Works Department for a land transfer from the Public Works Department to the Sustainability and Resilience Department for the Mission Creek at De La Vina Street Creek Restoration Project. And item 4, Library Department acceptance of English as a second language grant resolution. Recommendation that Council A accept a grant, recommendation Council B adopt by reading of title only, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 23076, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 to accept a grant in the amount of $169,702 funded by the California State Library.
All right, very good. And with that, are there any members of council that need to pull any items for discussion?
Mayor Rouse, may I pull item 6 just for comment, but I can vote together?
It can be voted on together with the rest? Okay. So would you read item 6 into the record, please?
Certainly. Item 6, authorization to execute a contract with BAE Urban Economics for inclusionary housing, density bonus, and hotel linkage fee analysis agreement.
And for the purposes of voting on this all together, we'll go ahead and make your comment now, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. So this is in response to the letter we received from the League of Women Voters in support of this item, but just wanting to emphasize for my comments that we really need this nexus analysis, and that I believe in support that what's most important is the nexus study between the market rate housing production and the created need or demand for new affordable housing, and also the nexus between hotel expansion and how that relates to creating need demand for affordable housing. And so also just highlighting in the letter, in addition to those two, the nexus necessary to have meaningful in lieu fees that would go towards our local affordable housing trust fund.
Very good. And Mr. Gutierrez, you have an item to read?
I just have a question about item 6. If city staff can just explain I've gotten a couple questions from the public about what hotel linkage means. Can you just define that for us, please?
Mr. Gullett.
Happily. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Gutierrez, we had a similar fee back in the early 90s. So what the hotel linkage fee is, it's similar to what the Nexus looks at. So what we're looking at is the generation of need for more affordable housing from hotel developments.
So hotel linkage refers to what exactly? Like why that phrasing?
It's a term of art. So the linkage is between the development of a new hotel room and how many new staff would be needed to attend to that hotel room, and then subsequently how much more affordable housing would be needed.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so it just refers to if you're going to build a hotel room, you also have to allocate a certain amount of funding to provide housing for the people that are going to work there.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, is there anyone on the line that needs to pull an item?
No raised hands, Mr. Mayor.
And also, do you have also the two remote ones? Are they indicated, or do they have to speak up for to be recognized?
They are not indicating they wish to speak either.
Okay, very good. So with that, none of the items have actually been pulled, so I will entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
So move.
Moved by Freeman, second by Jordan. And we'll take the roll call vote, please.
Very good. This is a motion for the entirety of the consent calendar by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Jordan. Councilmember Harmon. So was that yes?
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Snedden.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye, thank you. Passed unanimously. With that, we'll close the consent calendar and go to general public comment. And this is 3 minutes at the dais for any subject that is not on the agenda, but still within the purview of this body. And with that, we'll begin with Tom Ziel. I'm sorry if I'm misreading that. What is that last name?
Ziai.
Well, that's why I couldn't say it. Okay. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Ziai. I am a small hands-on landlord in town in city of Santa Barbara. And I have an issue with a COVID-19, 2019 ordinance that was passed by city council. And that has to do with the one-year lease and renewal after that. Every year, the landlords have to renew. And I was not aware of that, and nobody told me. There was no communication to the landlords, although we pay our business license fee every year. And so my case was that I had a tenant that has not been paying rent since the beginning of the year. And there was a lot of communication to get him to pay, but he refused. So I went to the court, and I filed an unlawful detainee. And took about a couple of months, and the judge finally dismissed the case because of that ordinance, which is ordinance, if you guys are not familiar, is 26.40.010, which requires a landlord to rewrite a lease every year. And that is so unfair to the landlords, because you're given a free one-year rent to any tenants that figures that out and goes out and files against it. And we have to go and pay $500 an hour for lawyer fee to fight it. And on top of that, loses rent for a whole year. And plus paying the utilities for the tenant that is not complying and all of that. So this law is unfair to the landlords. We do pay our taxes, fees, utilities, and on top of that, we have to pay for somebody that doesn't pay. And all the costs, lawyer fee, attorneys, court costs, and everything else. So this law should be removed since it's a COVID era, and the COVID is over, since 2021, and the lawyers don't know what to do with it, and the case is getting filled up by the landlords that they have tenants that they're not paying. So if you guys could help us out, remove that, be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. David Crockett Williams. Oh, Mr. Gutierrez, I'm sorry, you had a question for the last speaker.
Sir, if you can contact Holly in our office, I'd like to talk to you about what we can do.
Mr. Williams, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the American Peace March. We're organizing a peace march to the White House. Its theme is to correct America by restoring the great law of peace, which is the law that the great law of peace was an inspiration to the United States when it's founded from the Iroquois. And I'll be submitting, I already sent a draft to the Mayor Rouse and for a proclamation to restore the great law of peace. And we'll be coming to Santa Barbara from the 14th to the 17th of May, to walking through town to gain support for this cause, which includes the liberation of the free energy technologies, which were pioneered in Santa Barbara by Bruce De Palma and sponsored by the Sunburst community in Buellton now, which built the first free energy generator. And lately it's come to pass that the Dr. Stephen Greer, a trauma specialist, medical doctor, is championing the legislation in our Congress to remove the secrecy restrictions over the last 100 years since Nikola Tesla's time to implement these free energy technologies. So these are among many issues we'll be carrying and promoting. I just completed a book for the last 13 months working on it called Restoring the Great Law of Peace. Tell the truth, the real truth. And so I implore you to get your heads together and look at this concept of restoring the great law of peace and help me make Santa Barbara the forefront community in the American peace movement to make that real. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any public commenters online, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one raised hand. Aaron Ashland. Aaron Ashland, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I watched one of the bike parades on St. Patty's. It was almost 2 blocks long. In the past, I've seen some motorcycle cops escort these types of groups to ensure their safety. I didn't see any police this year. Is this one of the things we won't be able to expect with our current levels of policing, Mr. Mayor? Would you create a list of things we can no longer expect from our police department? I want to be clear again that I don't blame the officers for our police vacancies, now double what they were when you were elected. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you being on the homeless advocacy Zoom call last week. I brought up a homeless woman who had been tormenting some businesses on Lower State. Apparently she was arrested last week for throwing a bottle at a police officer, but was right back out. And yesterday she dropped her pants and defecated on the sidewalk in front of Caspucci. You see, I think it's funny when you talk about what should be done downtown, and the thing we really need is enough police to prevent crimes and things like I just mentioned that are terrible for downtown visitors to deal with, not to mention the business owners. No worries though, Mr. Mayor. The police department called me back 2.5 hours later and asked if she was still there. Obviously she wasn't. So how does that crime get reported? Does it just disappear so that we're under the illusion that our police shortage isn't that bad? Is that part of your plan to balance the budget? just have less officers, Mr. Mayor? Are we short detectives? What types of crimes don't get investigated with you as our mayor? Has anyone led you to believe that we are short officers because of anything other than we don't pay enough? I mean, we have a great new chief, so the rest is really up to your leadership, isn't it? I heard you didn't like the idea of having security guards patrolling downtown, but what do you think is going to help with twice as many police vacancies as when you were elected? On your campaign website, you wrote, "Our mayor and city council have not been supportive of public safety and constantly debate peeling away funding to satisfy a passionate anti-police movement. Not only is this logic horribly flawed, it is violation of the precept of the highest and promised civic priority, which is public safety. Well-staffed and well-equipped public safety departments cannot be compromised. You ran on clean and safe streets, but under your watchful eye, we can't even protect a bunch of fun-loving bicycle riders or children from having to watch an adult defecate on the sidewalk. Please do your job." Thank you.
Any further public speakers online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, with that, we'll close public comment and move on to the administrative calendar. We have an item to read.
Item 7, Sustainability and Resilience Equity Programs and Acceptance of Funding Resolution. And I have a couple resolutions to read here. Recommendation of Council B, adopt by reading of title only, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving participation in the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program, accepting voucher funds, authorizing the Sustainability and Resilience Director to enter into voucher agreements, and amending Resolution Number 23076, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 to increase revenue and expenditure appropriations by $236,500 in the Sustainability and Resilience Department Miscellaneous Grants Fund for Low-Income Bike Share Infrastructure and Programming. Item D, adopt by reading of title only, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara accepting grant funds, authorizing Sustainability and Resilience Director to enter into grant agreements, and amending Resolution Number 23076, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 to increase revenue and expenditure appropriations by $229,264 in the Sustainability and Resilience Department fiscal year 2024 Solid Waste Fund for Organics Waste Reduction, Recycling Outreach and Education. And finally, item E, adopt by reading of title only, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara accepting a donation of $6,500 from West Coast Financial and amending Resolution Number 23076, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 to increase revenue and expenditure appropriations by $6,500 in the Sustainability and Resilience Department fiscal year 2024 Creeks Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Fund for swimming lesson scholarships.
All right, very good. Parento?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Council members. I'm Alelia Parento, the City's Sustainability and Resilience Director, and I am joined today by a number of our staff who will introduce themselves as they present their slides. We're going to talk a little bit about the initiatives that our department has taken on to promote equity in access to climate resources. As you've likely noticed from the staff report and from the clerk's reading of our recommendations, there are a number of funding resolutions that we're here to approve today. Related to funding for these programs that we're going to talk about. And this was really the impetus for us sharing this status update. Additionally, before moving on, I really do want to emphasize that significant efforts are being made throughout the city organization to promote and foster equity. Though today's presentation focuses on our department, our partner departments are also making great strides in this space. So first and foremost, what is equity? The city's Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Action, or IDEA working group, provided an excellent explanation of the difference to staff recently. They shared that equality is the state of being equal in quantity, rank, value, degree, etc. Simply put, everyone gets the same thing, as shown in the green figure on the screen. Equity, however, recognizes that perhaps different resources need to be allocated, or different differential treatment needs to be given to achieve a level playing field. So again, simply put, everyone gets what they need to achieve the same outcome, as depicted in the pink figure on the screen. So as we go through these programs, you'll see that we're taking that into consideration as we develop resources and allocations. And actually, before I go to this slide, this understanding is at the front of mind for all of our department as we look to provide our community with the tools that it needs to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change and to adapt to the impacts we're already feeling. The programs that the team is going to share today really underscore this goal. And so as we look to develop our program, we really abide by these guiding principles. Primarily, this includes ensuring that we're prioritizing bilingual community engagement and outreach, understanding that we must meet people where they are, both physically in the community, as well as their level of understanding of climate issues and their ability or capacity to act. We have to be consistent and show up regularly to build trust with all of our community members. We have to design our programs through this lens every time, ensuring that we aren't stranding our most vulnerable community members with unsustainable change. We have to distribute resources to where they're most needed, ensuring that everyone is brought along in our climate transition. And most importantly, we have to understand that we'll never do this perfectly, and we must be willing to adapt and improve based upon the needs of our community. So before I pass it off to staff, who are going to talk about all these programs, I just wanted to remind you about who the divisions are within the department. You'll hear a little bit from each of them. So we have our Energy and Climate, our Clean Community, which was formerly Environmental Services, our Creeks Division, and they'll all sort of touch on what community engagement is doing in these spaces. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jefferson Litton.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Jefferson Litton, the Energy and Climate Division Manager. It's a pleasure to be here before you this afternoon. So the Energy and Climate Division's mission is to help our city achieve this council's goal of carbon neutrality by 2035. We strive to make this journey simple, affordable, and accessible to all members of our community. So today I'll share just a couple of highlights of our efforts towards ensuring equity in that mission. One of our primary goals is to make electrification as affordable as possible for our community members. This year, Santa Barbara Clean Energy launched its first self-funded program, Electrify Your Ride, which offered a rebate for income-qualified customers who purchase an electric vehicle at twice the level of our standard rebate. Just yesterday, we doubled our income-qualified rebate to $4,000. So now, income-qualified customers can combine that $4,000 with a $7,500 tax credit and now purchase a brand new electric vehicle for $10,000. So even if you drop the price of an electric vehicle down to $10,000, there still remains some barriers for customers. Access to charging. So to address that challenge, we partnered with Santa Barbara Unified School District and the Housing Authority to site 130 new chargers at Santa Barbara Unified School District parking lots that will be available to multifamily residents and renters who cannot charge their vehicles at their home. So they can make reservations for those charging sites, and now we've removed that barrier to EV charging. Moving on to resilience hubs, we partnered with the Central Coast Climate Collaborative and the Community Environmental Council to identify ideal sites for resilience hubs that could offer essential services and information to communities before, during, and after disasters. Through this work, we identified the Franklin Center and the Eastside Library as an ideal site, and we surveyed community members to see the desired services that they would like to receive from those facilities. We continue to pursue funding opportunities to bring solar and battery storage to that facility so that it can stand up in the event that grid power goes down. Next year, we're going to be expanding our Santa Barbara Clean Energy programs into home electrification incentives. And similar to what we did with Electrify Your Ride, we're going to offer enhanced incentives to all of our income-qualified customers. And now to learn about our B-cycle low-income expansion, I'm going to pass this on to my colleague, Mr. Fertner.
Thank you, Mr. Litton. Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse, council members. Sam Fertner, Mobility Coordinator with the Sustainability and Resilience Department. And I'm excited to build on the work of my colleagues in our department and throughout the city to announce that we have been successful in getting $1.5 million in low-income funding for bike share here in the city. This money is coming from the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program. I'll refer to that as CMO moving forward. And this is a statewide initiative that uses cap-and-trade dollars to fund zero-emission shared mobility options in under-resourced communities throughout the state of California. The intent of this program, which is funded and managed by California Climate Investments as well as the California Air Resources Board, is to enhance access to safe, reliable, convenient, and affordable transportation options. What this translates to in the city of Santa Barbara is $1.5 million for hard infrastructure, so capital, electric bikes and docks, on the ground throughout our communities, as well as money for programming and outreach. Next slide, please. So within the city of Santa Barbara, these are our statewide designated AB 1550 low-income communities where CMO funding is eligible for use. And I'd like to point out on this slide, we do have existing bike share locations in many of these areas, but there are still gaps in the system, particularly looking at the lower west side, portions of the east side, where the density of bike share is not sufficient to be a truly reliable transportation option. And another benefit of the CMO grant is that it can provide funding for the development and implementation of a very robust low-income program. Next slide, please. We do currently have a low-income program. It's called B-Cycle for All. It's a couple of years old. One of the challenges has been really doing targeted outreach to potential low-income users. As the bike share pilot program has continued and developed over time, most of the focus has been getting bikes on the ground, developing the system. CMO funding will help close some of the outreach gap that we see, as well as the infrastructure gap. Just a couple of data points from our 2023 ridership survey. We saw about 40% of riders saying that they used bike share to replace a vehicle trip. And interestingly enough, we saw that around 16% of those more than 500 survey respondees make less than $50,000 annually. So how this links back to the B-Cycle for All program is, of all trips taken on bike share rides to date, we see about 2% low-income users. So we have a lot of room and a lot of work to do to really bolster this program and develop it and make it accessible for those residents of our community. Next slide. We last came before City Council in May of 2023 with an update on the bike share program. We heard a lot of support at that time, and we also heard a lot of interest in bolstering our low-income program. So with that in mind, staff went out and applied to the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program, and we received notice of intent to award in January of 2024. For housekeeping, in order to implement CMO, we need a resolution, so we are here today with a recommendation in support of accepting CMO grant funding. And we also need to extend our pilot program to be in compliance with the CMO grant guidelines. This is where it gets a little tricky. So from date of voucher execution, which is essentially when we sign the contract with CMO, that begins a 15-month planning and design phase, after which we, quote unquote, launch the low-income bike share stations, and we have to agree to operate for a 4-year service term. So our recommendation today in being compliance with CMO grant guidelines is to extend the pilot program to be in compliance with those CMO guidelines, depending on the date of voucher execution. Realistically, it's going to translate to a 2.5-year extension of the pilot program. With that, I will pass it over to Daniela Rosales from our Clean Community Division to speak about her efforts.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. I will briefly talk about some of the Clean Community Division's equity efforts. Recently, CalRecycle, a state agency, awarded our division about $229,000, which is great news. This grant would be used to aid local food recovery organizations with equipment purchases for their food distribution operations. We are also collaborating with the Parks and Recreation Department to apply funds towards food storage, refrigeration, and any other kitchen equipment that they may need for their food distribution program. Overall, these efforts will help to address food insecurity in our community and reduce food waste. Staff is recommending a resolution today for Council to accept and appropriate the grant funds. As part of our Clean SB program, our division also hosts monthly cleanups in which we provide supplies to residents to clean their neighborhoods. Organized youth groups are offered $500 as an added incentive. Each month we focus on a different area prioritizing neighborhoods that are more prone to litter and blight. These cleanups offer residents an opportunity not only to improve their neighborhoods, but also an opportunity to speak directly with a staff member on site about any other concerns that they may have. Now, I will go ahead and turn it over to Erin Markey with the Creeks Division to talk about their programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Good afternoon, Mayor and Councilmember. Erin Markey, Acting Creeks Division Manager. So the Creeks Division, our equity initiatives really relate to our mission of providing improved creek water quality and improved creek habitat through restoration. And fundamental to that we see is having safe access to our beaches and creeks for all of Santa Barbara to enjoy. So in addition to our capital improvement programs, which fund our water quality improvement and restoration projects, we have community stewardship events. We fund youth public education programs around watershed education. And we also have extensive bilingual outreach materials, media campaigns that we've created in partnership with our community engagement division. We recently hosted a beach cleanup with West Coast Financial, and they, following this cleanup event with our staff, generously donated $6,500 to the Creeks Division. And staff is recommending that this contribution should be directed to the Park Foundation to fund scholarships for swimming lessons. We see this as a nexus to provide safer access to our beach and creek resources. So this is one of the recommendations before you today. Lastly, I wanted to highlight an upcoming program, what we're calling our Urban Creek Trails Maps, which we're developing with our community engagement department. These are efforts aimed to bring more awareness and enjoyment of our creeks to all the neighborhoods of Santa Barbara. So more to come on that. Slide. So again, just to summarize the recommendations that are here before council today. And with that, that concludes our presentation, and we'll take questions.
All right, thank you very much. Questions from council members. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's so many of you, I'll just look at you, Layla. Is that, when you use the phrase EV, does that include a hybrid or just a purely electrical vehicle?
So the electric vehicle rebate applies to a hybrid, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, as well as electric motorcycles and all electric vehicles.
And then you're doubling our program's contribution, right? That's what you said?
Correct.
For a purchase. And was there any success in that over a period of how long before we doubled it?
So we've had 65 rebates that have been awarded to date. Of those, 5 were the income qualified rebates with twice the incentives, which was part of the impetus for raising that rebate to see if we can drive more demand there.
And what's success look like for either of those categories, given a city of our size? I don't know how many cars are there in Santa Barbara, and what is the 60, 65, or a number like that has to be a pretty small percentage.
So Councilmember Jordan, just to add on to what Mr. Litton was saying, that's 65 in the last 3 months. So
Okay.
it's fairly exciting. It's
All right.
definitely successful. What does success look like? 100%.
Right, yeah.
That is
Okay.
when we're truly successful. But no, I mean, EVs are outpacing ICS engine sales in California, and so just matching that percentage, I think, would be a positive success. You know, we'll continue to build upon the program, and really community engagement is the key, right? Working with the auto dealerships, ensuring that they're selling that. I believe Councilmember Sneddon just participated in that process, and so can tell us what it was like. But success looks like everyone having access to an electric vehicle should they wish to drive one.
So I heard you say the first step of success would be 50-50 market share, right? Is that what you said?
I would feel really good about 50-50. I think
Okay.
25% would be very successful at this rate, yeah.
All right. And then is it, I get the whole equity thing, really. I mean, on board with that. But is there really data that shows that there could be a much higher concentration of EVs in what you're calling under-resourced, high rental concentration in low-income neighborhoods? Just the parking's different, the infrastructure's different. I mean, and I get it, you have a plan to attack both of those, but I don't know, I'll ask that, and then I kind of have a follow-up question on why that instead of a greater emphasis on bicycles. So go ahead.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Jordan. I think I can answer both questions in one answer. I think there's no right option for every person, right? And so what our division is trying to do is maximize those options and reduce barriers. So what Mr. Litton's group is doing is providing access to a vehicle that might be too expensive otherwise, and then also tackling the remaining problems. So access to charging, cost of charging, reliability of energy, right? These are all things that were not discussed today because they don't all have an equity component specifically, but really making sure that that whole package is addressed. And then add on to that B-cycle, because not everyone has a good storage place for their expensive e-bike or access to an e-bike. So B-cycle sort of breaks down that hurdle. And then we're continuing to look at, e-bike rebates for the community, library of things that we partner with the library on provides other access to mechanisms. So what are all of the ways that we can help our community decarbonize their commute, their single-use trips, and be through active transportation or electrified transportation?
And so segueing over to bicycles, with all the bicycle fun infrastructure that we're putting in lately, it's just this big holistic mix. There's not a better return on investment with the on-the-ground improvements we're making in bicycle access or bicycle availability of bike lanes and where you can ride and how they make, to put more emphasis on bicycles, rather getting people on electric bicycles and just having access to move on anything cross town on a bicycle than there would be on the most expensive component, which would be an EV bike.
Honorable Mayor and Councilmember Jordan, I don't think so,
Okay.
because I just don't think it works for everyone. As a mother of 2 children, I simply can't do everything I
Right.
need to do on a bicycle,
Got
right?
that one.
And I think everyone in this room could share a story that precludes some transportation option at some time. So what we're trying to do again is sort of invest across the board, making
Okay.
sure people have access when they can.
Call it holistic, right? So last question. I just reminded myself, I pretended to go sign up again on B-Cycle. So it's not bilingual. And I don't remember, because I don't want to put in all the rest of my information, but I'm assuming somewhere in that process, on my membership, I have a credit card in there, and I have a driver's license, or I have some other identifying piece of information. So while we're throwing money at this to try and fix it, is not part of the challenge also the vendor not keeping up with us or needing to do a better job there too?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, it's an excellent question, and I think that the short answer is there is certainly room for improvement. That being said, the low-income program has not been the priority, and with CMO funding, it's going to ensure that that rises to a priority level for us at the city, and it's going to enable staff time and resources on everybody's end, from city staff, B-Cycle, and then partnering entities as well, as far as best practices in really achieving outreach to that targeted population.
So I lied, I have one more question. And on this link up on the having to extend the agreement with B-Cycle to meet our status with the grant, is this not our time to leverage B-Cycle participating at a greater level before we extend the contract?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, as part of the CMO grant obligation, B-Cycle is committing to years of operation and compliance with the very rigorous CMO guidelines. So we will be generating budget milestones as well as a project implementation schedule. And if those guidelines are not met, we will not be reimbursed through the voucher. So this is a reimbursement voucher. This is not a lump sum distribution. So reimbursement is contingent on deliverables being in the field and showing to be effective.
And that deliverable is a lower income, under-resourced neighborhood, that type of thing, those actual deliverables?
Precisely.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. As you know, I love everything that this department does. I'm really appreciating the emphasis on this presentation on equity. I think we've talked a lot about how a lot that we need to do in environmental movements and sustainability needs to be community-wide, and as you've addressed that. So my questions are going to be really specifically about the equity pieces of that. So if first, could you talk a little bit about Santa Barbara Clean Energy and how we decided as a city to have our own energy procurement and the benefits of that and how those specifically can be applied to equity programs?
Yes, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, as most of you know, or all of you know, we founded, the City of Santa Barbara founded a community choice aggregation program in 2021, which basically meant we took over the procurement of electricity to the entire community. Southern California Edison continues to deliver it. We buy and build the electrons. What that allowed us to do is bring local control into sources of power, rate design, and then reinvestment of any surplus revenues that happen, because the energy market is volatile, into our community directly, as opposed to Southern California Edison's territory-wide reinvestments or to their shareholders. So that has meant that we have money that we can now design these programs to meet, as Mr. Litton said, Council's carbon neutrality goals, and to really allocate, as that equity slide in the beginning said, allocate those resources in a way that brings everyone along on equal footing. And so that is what the Energy and Climate team is working on, starting with the Electrify Your Ride rebate and moving towards building electrification and beyond. We won't stop there. Really ensuring that everyone has access, sort of to Councilmember Jordan's point, not everyone wants an electric car. So what else can we provide to the community? And what do our specific community members need to sort of get over the hump, right? Any hurdles that they need to make those choices, those climate smart choices.
And just like order of magnitude, how much funding are we talking about that by going our own way, we were able to have extra funds to address these types of issues?
Well, you will be getting the budget presentation from Mr. DeMartini shortly. But in fiscal year 25, Santa Barbara Clean Energy is proposing to allocate $1.75 million to these programs, with an additional $750,000 to climate adaptation and resilience programs for the community. So
thank you. I really wanted to emphasize that because it's been phenomenal. So then resilience hubs, you know I'm a very big fan of resilience hubs. And so specifically in terms of equity and how this can serve disproportionately impacted communities during disaster, after, before information, could you sort of talk about specifically for equity how the Resilience Hub addresses that?
Councilmember Sneddon and Mayor Rouse. So for the Resilience Hub study that we did, we wanted to go into our community and do bilingual outreach and see the resources that the community wanted to see from the Resilience Hub. And through that research, we learned a few things. The services they want to see from that site are food distribution, water distribution, a place where they can get trusted information, and a place where they can charge their devices in terms when the power goes out. So now, coupled with that information, we can develop the programming that that community wants to see, and then basically stand that building up so that it will continue to operate in times of power shutoff. So it's really, in terms of equity, is meeting the needs of each community.
And those will be bilingual?
All the outreach that was conducted was bilingual, and then all the resources that are developed are bilingual as well.
Thank you. And then along those lines, anything, I mean, we've been seeing in storms, and we've talked about with sea level rise, which I realize is not specifically this department, but intersections with that and equity, how we can be addressing Lower East Side or areas that are now flooding more frequently and with more impact.
Yes, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon. So we are working, we do have the climate adaptation program within our department and are looking at pursuing the priority actions in the sea level rise adaptation plan, which actually really focus on the Lower East Side and hardening not only the utilities and city infrastructure there, but ensuring protection for those low-lying areas. Additionally, we've secured funding from the Coastal Conservancy that was going to be used to study some of the shoreline infrastructure, but we might actually pivot to work with the Public Works Department to look at Lower East Side stormwater capture, with hopes to do a lot more of that in the future. That's very expensive, as you know, but certainly a priority of the organizations.
Thank you. And then Councilmember Jordan also alluded to the multifamily charging stations, something we talk about a lot in the committee level. Very hard nut to crack how to get charging stations available. And you mentioned schools, the Santa Barbara School District. Are there other areas too, City College or MTD stations or other places where we're focusing community-wide?
Yeah, Mr. Hoff, Councilmember Sneddon through Mayor Rouse, we are actively looking at bringing public EV charging across all of the city. Basically looking at any available public lots and what we can fit there. We're pursuing a number of grant opportunities to do such work. It's also worth mentioning that this particular program, the multifamily program, was grant funded. So it's basically matching the grants with the needs.
Yeah, that's such an excellent point. And when you're mentioning the $7,500 federal rebate, upping it to $4,000 for the city income qualified rebate, and that I don't know if people realize that if on a single charge you can go almost 300 miles, so you don't need to be plugging in every single day for that charge. So it can be, for the week, plug in one place. And so I think this is just a really great option. The last question I have, or actually two, one is about for addressing food insecurity and distribution, but I'm also a big fan of community gardening or different ways. Is that something that we're looking at or could be looking at or maybe already have?
Yes, Councilmember Sneddon, Mayor Rouse. We are also collaborating with the Parks and Recreation Department currently with an existing grant that we had for the first round for the same Cal Recycle grant to appropriate some of those funds and use them towards compost and mulch application for their community garden program, and just some general updates and equipment they need to improve the lots that are already existing. We've worked with them in the past on compost distribution as well. So this new round of the grant can also be applied towards that. And if that's something they identify that they need, we definitely will help with that.
Great.
Thank you.
And I'd like to put in a plug for maybe even expanding our community gardens. I think there are a lot of places that we could tuck them in, or people themselves could tuck them in, and maybe with help from the city. And my last question is about B-Cycle. Very supportive of having other ways to support a income qualified program. And I'm wondering, to Councilmember Jordan's questions too about needing credit card information or driver's license, if it could be run through the schools that already have that information verifiable on file, not credit cards, but income and whether income qualified, and that maybe there might be another way to be distributing that.
Councilmember Sneddon, Mayor Rouse, really the breaking the nut of the low-income program is two parts, in my opinion. One of which is actually just spreading information and knowledge about this program and how it might benefit certain populations. As I mentioned previously, a lot of the focus has been on doing the implementation, putting the hard infrastructure on the ground. We're now getting to a point where we have more staff time, we have more resources, and there can be further development of effective, targeted, low-income outreach, which really translates to somebody at a table during a food distribution, potentially, and bilingual outreach, but robust bilingual outreach. So we'll be leveraging all the resources within our department as well as throughout the city and our different partners that we'll be working with to implement this project. The second part of that equation is the inherent challenge of a docked bike share system, especially with an electric bike that has a street value of about $3,000. And so when a user checks out that bike, they need to be responsible for that bike. And that's where the credit card comes in, is a way to at least have an assurance and kind of a mutual agreement that somebody's going to be respectful of that property. So that's still a major barrier. I will say that outreach will help with that, and that our department has also been working on trying some new solutions like the Library of Things, a B-Cycle membership that one can check out and utilize as needed. So that's something that we've looked at, and additionally looking, as Ms. Parenta mentioned earlier, at the potential of some kind of an e-bike incentive or rebate for ownership would be another path to get around that issue.
Thank you. I just really well done. I love the emphasis on equity, and I think you haven't even mentioned maybe half more programs that, you know, you mentioned the Library of Things. Like I've checked out the induction stovetop, and there's so many different things. So just well done. Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great questions from my colleagues. So I won't ask any of those. So I just have one that hasn't been asked, and this gets to the creeks on the swimming grant. So when I look at all these, swimming is arguably it is the one that is the most impactful in a way to everyone, especially families here. No offense to bicycles and cars and electricity, right? Because if you don't have ability to swim, especially at an early age, you miss out on a lot of opportunities in school and other. So my question is, with this grant, how are we getting the word out to families? How many individuals is this expected to serve? And then another question is, will this primarily, where is it going to take place? Is it at Ortega Park or Los Baños or another location?
Councilmember Friedman, Mayor Rouse, thanks for the question. So it's really a donation we received that staff felt like the Creeks Division is fully funded. We don't need this extra donation. So we decided that swimming lessons seemed like a good fit to appropriate these funds to. So working with the Parks Foundation, they currently offer scholarship programs for city swimming lessons. And so this is going to just go into their existing program for scholarships.
Okay, so it's to the Park Foundation. Okay, so another time I'll bring that up because I think it is such an important issue in terms of economic opportunity for youth and families and everything. So that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any public speakers online for this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, with that, I'll bring it back to council for comments and/or motion. Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Just for comments, I just continue to be so incredibly impressed and inspired with this department. You never are resting on your laurels, but always pushing it further, and I'm really responsive to council direction that we want these programs and emphasizing equity and accessibility, and I'm just so incredibly proud of the work that you do and bringing these things forward. I'm really happy to move all of the staff recommendations.
Mr. Jordan. I'm sorry?
She made a motion. So,
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Staff recommendations moved and seconded. Senator Jordan.
Generally agree with everything you just heard, and on a big picture, I certainly embrace all of this. I'm having a lot of trouble with C, or the second one. I just think structurally, the vendor has to be in the same place that we say we're going. Having bilingual support to walk somebody through an English access point is not access. That access point by our third-party vendor needs to reflect the same standards or ideals we want to. And if we're talking about equity, they need to be talking about equity too. If we're talking about low income and access that historically is underrepresented, then they have to have a mechanism there, or we as a partner need to have a mechanism that together with them that addresses that. Otherwise, you look up at the end of the day and you're not getting reimbursed and it's on us. I'm not going to nut and bolt this to death, but that's just a concern. Just when I sit here right now and I Google on and pretend I want to sign up again at B-Cycle, and there's not even an option to get to a second language. And if we were in LA, it'd be like 10 languages you better have, or San Francisco, it'd be 20 languages. But here, definitely, we need that second language of Spanish. So only other comment I have to make, totally off on a tangent, is on the community and engagement block that was up there earlier. And I think collectively with us and with the community, you need to do better at real-time responses to current issues. And I'll just use an example that Alelia knows, like why am I running down to say, I use the same energy I use the same electricity I was 13 months ago. The Jordan household is really static right now, and I'm paying $150 more a month, even when I was already signed up with clean energy. And there's a story to that, but the story should be a proactive story rather than a reactive story to people going ballistic on Nextdoor, or me saying, okay, I'm seeing that and what's the deal? I think we just need to do a better job at feeling that pulse out there on some of the known and unknown consequences that come up as we sort of migrate to this new whole sustainability cloud over us, that type of thing. So willing to help on that, if you ever need help on that, willing to share more opinions on that you'll just be bored listening to, but happy to help with that. I'm not saying that's a concern, and I'm not willing to put in the work to help you with that too. Happy to do that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alejandra Gutierrez has her hand raised. Ms. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank the department for all of their great work that they've been doing. I am so pleased when in the slide you guys mentioned that it is hard work to do the community engagement. You guys are definitely doing the work. I have seen a difference in my district with the bikes. I do agree with Mr. Jordan about if we can talk to our vendor to see if we can get the application in the Spanish version. But I just wanted to thank every single one of you. It's amazing the work that you guys are doing, the outreaching and the swimming lessons. Bravo. One of the huge needs in not only in my district, but with children throughout the city is learning how to ride bikes and swimming. So when I heard about the swimming lessons, children know how to get to the ocean. They just don't know how to swim. So thank you so much for all your work.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. So first, I would first want to thank our staff for all the great work, and it's great to see all the staff present. Some of you haven't presented before, or very few times, so it's great to see you up here. And as I recently learned doing some legislative advocacy with Ms. Parento, is that our sustainability department is the envy of virtually every city in the state of California right now. And so I'm glad that going back, Councilmember Sneddon and I and the rest of the council back 4 years ago, when there was a real push to join other community choice aggregators, and there was a spirited discussion at council at the time, and we decided to stay local for this very reason, to invest in programming, and it is now paying off 10, 100-fold, whatever you want to call it, and it's only going to improve over time. And I just wanted to share a quick story of why the swimming lessons are important in the community. Is virtually every student in the city of Santa Barbara, when they're in elementary school, most of the schools, they go to Catalina for CME camp in the 5th grade. And if you don't know how to swim, that experience can be very negative for a child, because what will happen, and this actually happened when one of my sons went there when they were in 5th grade, is that you all get to Catalina, you're there with all your classmates, and one of the kids did not know how to swim. And so all the other kids got to go with snorkeling, see everything. That kid had to find, that they were with an adult, but they had to find a place where they could dip their head in the water from land that was deep enough so they could put the goggles on. But they're not able to swim and experience all that. So not only do they not get the full experience, it leads to issues that they're different than all the other kids. And so the fact that I really want to appreciate West Coast Financial for raising this issue and raising some funding to help more get the swimming lessons, because I think ultimately in a town that is a beach town, we're a water polo town, we're a swimming town, it's very important that everyone has access. So it's a great thing. So I'm fully supportive of moving this forward today. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, we have a first and a second on the motion for the entirety of A through E. Is that correct? All right, very good. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, this is a motion for item 7 for the recommended actions. A motion by Councilmember Zedin, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Jordan. Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Snedden.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Harmon.
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye, thank you. It passed unanimously. Good work. Thank you. All right, very good. I skipped over the council member committee assignment reports. We'll do those now. Has anybody got a council member committee assignment report? Mr. Friedman.
I think I just have one thing to report, but it was actually a great one. It was the Airport Commission this past week was a full house from the public, and news media was there, John Palmentary, Tracy Lair, and the hot topic was the restoration of the hangars. And I just wanted to report out that back in 2022, the council approved funding to commission a study on how to save those hangars and what was the best use. And so that report is done, it came to the Airport Commission, and it was unanimous in support of the option 2, which was to restore and reuse the hangars in place. And although they weren't agendized to make a specific recommendation, one will be coming to council on April 30th, but the Harbor Commission, or not the Harbor, the Airport Commission and the public were unanimously in support of restoring and reusing those in place. And those were a city of historic buildings all over, but those are in and of themselves unique to what we have here. And there's some of the only, if the only remaining structures of that type of going back to the early days of aviation in the United States. And so I look forward to April 30th having that discussion here. And it was celebrated, and I want to thank Mr. Hastert and his staff for bringing that forward. It's a long time coming, and the public was really supportive of it. Thank you.
Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Just briefly, attended Water Commission meeting. We heard about updates on the Vic Trace Reservoir Replacement Project. Also, now that we're all on AMI, looking for ways to message that out and handle when people have water leaks. And it was notable that there are 3 landslides right now that are impacting water issues, but on West Mountain Drive, on Las Alturas, and on Barker Pass. So looking at those, we did have a brief update on the reserve policy, and this was in response to Councilmember Harmon's requests, and sort of reaffirmed our current water policy, reserve policy. I also attended the Planning Commission meeting for La Cumbre Plaza concept review, as many of us did, and attended the COMB regular meeting. And just of note that Kachuma currently is at 150% of its historic amounts of water for this time.
All right, very good. And with that, we'll move on to the next item. We have an item to read, Madam Clerk.
Item 8, City Administrator's recommended mid-cycle budget for fiscal year 2025.
All right, just like the holiday season, it's budget season. Mr. DiMartini.
What an intro. Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and members of the City Council. My name is Keith DiMartini. I'm the city's finance director. I'm here with Ms. Glusick, the city's budget manager, Ms. Needle and Ms. Valencia, members of the city's budget team. It is our pleasure to present an overview of the city administrator's recommended budget for fiscal year 2025. The agenda for today's presentation is to first give a high-level overview of the budget and the major changes that the City Council and the public will see in the recommended budget over the course of the next couple of weeks. We will give an overview of the general fund and the outlook in the general fund. We'll talk about the budget hearing calendar. So there's a number of public hearings, finance committee meetings, and so we'll talk about how the public can be engaged with the city's budget process. And then we'll give an online demonstration of the budget book, and then of course take questions, public comment, and discussion. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Glusick.
Thank you, Mr. DiMartini. Honorable Mayor Rouse, members of council, and members of the public. Just at the top of this presentation, we'd like to note that in preparing for next week's Finance Committee meeting, we found that one of the pages for downtown parking had some omissions of data from their tables. These dollar amounts were included in the overall budget. They are included in the Public Works summary documents, and if you click through to the reports from those tables, that data is included in the data set. So it was not an omission from a budget, it is simply a presentation issue, and that will be sorted after this meeting. Next slide, please. So this is a broad overview of the budget development phases, excuse me. So finance starts with a base budget. We had formerly called it status quo. We found that that was a bit confusing, so we changed the nomenclature to something a bit more appropriate as the base, because it is where we start, using the prior year numbers and changing some of the things that we do know, such as MOU agreements between the labor units and the city, economic factors that are influencing our numbers, et cetera, to come up with a more substantial and correct base for that. The next step is that the departments will receive this and they give their input as to what they believe they need and what they can do with the budget that they have, and create a proposal that they did bring back to finance and the city administrator, and we all collaboratively work up a budget to propose to you, our council. That is where we are today. We are submitting the recommended budget. There has been a lot of very hard work and a lot of analysis going into this. We really appreciate all of the city staff who had their hands on this. A lot of knowledge going into this. And then the next steps will be, after the next coming weeks, we'll see a couple of presentations having to do with the changes from what was adopted last year as the second year of the two-year plan and what we are presenting today. So we will be concentrating on those changes in those presentations. And then afterwards, you are familiar with the deliberation process, where we have a discussion and you give staff the final direction as to what to incorporate in the budget. And then at the following meeting on June 11th, we will be adopting the budget. So on the calendar, that process looks a little like this. It's fairly consistent. It is a ever-evolving and improving process, but this is fairly consistent from year to year. In October through December, we come up with a multi-year forecast that we continually evolve with emerging information. We work on our position allocations, and what that is all of the people working for the city, how do we charge them out? Who pays for them? Which departments? What kind of work are they doing, and how do they get paid for? And then we wind that up with a budget kickoff with the citywide staff group getting together to look at what the goals are for the year and what the base budget looks like. In January through March, the departments then will give their input into that budget, into that departmental entry phase of the budget. They then have the meetings with the city administrator and finance at the end of that rotation. And again, that was that collaboration that we talk about to come up with the best plan for how the city can make the most of its money to deliver services to our citizens. We also look at the capital budget during these months to look at what the plan is, the long-term plan for our capital planning, and what we'll do this year with our spend. That's with the various capital funds, including the general fund capital and Measure C capital funds. And we also balance the general fund. And when I say balance the general fund, what I mean is we figure out whether we have enough money to do what we want to do or we're short. And we will, as we will see this year, we're a bit short this year. In April through June, which is where we are, we file the proposed budget, which is what we're doing today. And then we have Finance Committee reviews where we take our budget to the Finance Committee, and Finance Committee can ask questions, the public can ask questions, and then we also go, at that time, we also will go over the fee changes. Every year, we review the fee schedule, and we make changes as we find appropriate. We put up a red line version of that showing where all the changes are so that the public and council can review those and give us feedback. We also do our budget presentations. This year, they are all in regularly scheduled council meetings rather than all of those special meetings. So they will be on the regular meeting days. And then hopefully, if all goes well, we take all of the changes that you propose to us and come up with a better idea, and then we get it adopted. Then there's 3 months that look like they're not included in the rotation there. That is actually when we start implementing that budget. We start looking at the feedback for how appropriate it was. There's these things that we call carryovers, where if you have a multi-year project, that the money from that was approved in the prior year, and so we carry it over from year to year until that project is spent instead of reappropriating it each year. We also look at the internal city services, not internal combustion systems, as our prior presenters would say, ICS. Those are the services that our departments give to each other. So things like information technology, so all of our computers, et cetera, and also the overhead allocations, so things like the finance services that finance provides to other city departments. And so we study those, make sure those get incorporated into the next round. Next slide, please. So again, we usually have a 2-year cycle. Well, we do have a 2-year cycle. Last year was our 2-year budget cycle where we adopted a 2-year plan. This is the middle of that cycle, that 2-year cycle. So this is actually a mid-cycle update. We will focus on the changes between what was in that second year of the 2-year plan and what we have updated given emerging information, and look at those changes in these presentations. The format of our online recommended budget is pretty standard. It starts with a budget message from our city administrator, and then we go through some summary schedules, which will show at a high level things like our community profile, so some stats on where Santa Barbara is, what we do, where most of our money comes from, et cetera. Revenues and expenditures by fund, so you can see at a very high level where the money comes from, where it is coming in, and where it's going out. We also look at the position summary. Again, when I spoke of those position allocations, this is where everybody's, every employee kind of gets distributed across the city, and which departments and funds have those employees. We also look at a capital summary, so where those capital dollars are getting spent, and a general fund overview, and also other funds overview. And then after that, we have operating budget by department. Each department has a program overview that shows its revenues and expenditures at a high level, and also has its core performance measures in line with Vision 2030. And then underneath that, we have a subsequent story page for each of the programs so that you can dig down and see what's happening with your tax dollars. Next slide. As mentioned, we have shifted our, in prior years, our budget book to an online format. We continue to make improvements and to take your feedback and other feedback to the presentation video materials that go along with, and also the video. So after this meeting today, you will see these slides attached and the video of this presentation so that we will be able to go back and review it if a citizen would like to go back and see what was going on or have a closer look at the slides. That information will be available. We've also added some drop-down menus across the top for easier navigation. And at the end of this presentation, we'll go ahead and do a quick demo so that we can walk you through how to navigate through the budget book. Next slide. This is a high-level overview of our expenditure by major fund. As a reminder, the enterprise funds do not utilize tax dollars. They are fee-for-service, and they have to generate their own revenue. So if they spend money, they're responsible for generating that revenue to cover those expenditures. You also see familiar funds like the Measure C Capital Fund, which is has its own oversight committee, et cetera. The internal service funds, which I mentioned earlier, like IT, et cetera. And the general fund takes about 1/3 of our expenditure from the total budget. Next slide. Here are some of our overarching challenges. So retention and recruitment, it's a very competitive market out there in our labor market. The labor pool is not terribly large and there is a lot of competition out there. So we really do our best to try and find really good talent and make this a desirable place to work. Part of that is affording labor wage increases and making sure that people can have a living wage. We also know that healthcare costs are increasing every year. Those insurance costs are going up, as we can see from our invoices each year and the quotes that we get. We do try to keep it reasonable, but we want to have good healthcare coverage as part of our good workforce plan. Pension costs are increasing, as well as our unfunded liability. That is primarily due to volatility in CalPERS reserve returns. Sorry, not reserves. There's also some economic uncertainty out there. Just turn on the news. There's a lot of things that are hard to forecast in the post-pandemic era, but there's also a lot of other factors out there up to and including the world political situation right now. We also have inflation. Inflation has slowed down a bit, but it's still kind of high, and that increases our input costs as it does everybody's input costs. If we all experience it every day when we go to the grocery store, right? And our reserve policy, we do have to have our reserves per our policies. When we do have emergencies, we do dip into those reserves. So it's important to keep our reserves properly funded. And also our self-insurance program, we have gotten actuarial information that those costs are going up as well. And so these are things that are causing us concern and challenges that have to be met. Some other challenges, again, as I mentioned, salary and pension costs, we have increased on some of those assumptions. One of the things we did was in FY24 and 25, we had 4% and 3% increase assumptions respectively. We changed that assumption to 5.5%, given what some of the MOUs from the labor negotiations have turned out to be, and also planning for implementation of the class and comp study. Tax revenue is softening. It is decelerating towards a new normal and looking slightly flat. So while our costs increase, our tax revenue, which is our largest revenue base, is actually flattening out. The housing element implementation has created 2 new positions, and some of that is being offset by expenditure reductions in other places, but not all of it. Inflation, again, it's slowing down, but we're still seeing expenditure increases due to inflation. The downtown parking fund is depleted. You will see a comprehensive presentation from downtown parking at the regularly scheduled Finance Committee meeting on April 30th at noon. That's next Tuesday, so a week from today, and how that is going to be phased, but that will have an impact on the general fund. All of these things together give us a projected deficit in the general fund of about $7.1 million. This budget is prepared in line with Vision 2030's goals. Here is a reminder of what those goals are. Next slide. And here is a reminder of the pillars that we are trying to achieve. Thriving workforce, as I mentioned, some of those challenges. Getting a good, engaged employee base is one of our main goals. We're also looking towards any efficiencies and prioritizing our programs in a community-based manner to achieve that organizational optimization. We are also looking for innovation where we can find it and where it is beneficial with things like the online budget book, but also with converting some things to online payments, streamlining our processes, et cetera. Next slide. Last year, as part of Vision 2030, we adopted a cost and recovery revenue policy. And just as a reminder, this was to help guide our departments in setting their fees and really draw down to the philosophy of what we're doing for our public with these fees. We need money to run, but we cannot be charging for absolutely everything. That is not our purpose. And so we rather use these things as a guideline from what is mostly community-based and a benefit for the entire community, such as public safety or public park maintenance, which we may not be able to recover entirely and we'll have to subsidize with tax dollars, up through a series of questions that get you to, it's mostly an individual-based benefit, such as a private tennis lesson or a facility rental, where it's not a community-wide benefit, and so that would be a fee. Our annual fee changes run alongside of our budget process. They are part of the budget process, as the fees will inform our revenues. The departments review the fees in the beginning of the calendar year between January and March, which is in line when they're developing their departmental entry for their budget. Then we have committee and commission review right now with April through May, which is in line with when we are presenting and submitting the budget. And then city council review and recommendation in May, along with our budget. And then the city will adopt those new fee schedules with whatever alterations the council employs in June. And those fees are available for review on our budget website. And with that, I will turn it back to Mr. DiMartini.
Thank you very much, Ms. Glusick. So now I'm going to give just a really high-level overview of the major impacts on the city's general fund, the largest fund in the city. This slide here is a summary of the multi-year general fund forecast that we produce at the very beginning of the budget cycle every year. And it shows a long-range projection of the general fund revenues in the dotted green line and the general fund expenditures in the red line. And so as you can see, the red line is outpacing the green line, indicating that we do have a deficit, and that deficit is actually growing as the years go on. And it's most notable on the right-hand side. Many of the other factors that Ms. Glusick mentioned earlier are the reasons why that is occurring in regards to the increasing costs of our labor and materials and supplies and our capital investment, and the slow growth of our major tax base and other revenues. Next slide, please. As Ms. Glusick mentioned earlier, the deficit is projected at $7.1 million next fiscal year. I'd like to break that down so that it's very clear as to how the budget is being prepared with that deficit. Total general fund revenues in fiscal year 2025 is just over $216 million, with expenditures at $220 million. So there's a deficit right there. However, because the city's reserve policy requires that 25% of reserves are kept, 25% of general fund expenditures are kept in reserve. Because our expenditures are growing every year, we actually need to keep more money in reserve every year because it's based on a percentage base. And so we need to keep a little bit more money every year in reserve. And so when you take the operating deficit plus the need to keep $2.9 million of additional revenue in reserve, that is how that $7.1 million deficit is calculated. It's also important to note that as, again, part of Vision 2030 and part of the strategies of reaching more of a balanced budget over the past 5 fiscal years is that staff has worked with City Council to implement a number of expenditure reductions. We have been reducing our expenditures in order to sort of minimize the impact on reserves. And that the target reduction in fiscal year 2025 was $4.1 million. So if we did not take those expenditure reductions, our expenditures would be higher, which means that the deficit would be higher to the tune of about $11.2 million. So I just wanted to walk through this table so that there's clarity. Next slide, please. Another way of thinking about our expenditure growth in the general fund as it relates to reductions is sort of summarized on this table right here. It's important to note that the general fund expenditures grow pretty substantially every year, and so is our revenue. Our revenue is growing as well. Over the past 3 years, expenditures have grown by about $35 million. And we have implemented some expenditure reductions to minimize the impact on the community over those couple years, but the amount of expenditure reductions is rather small compared to the overall growth of our general fund expenditures, which have grown between 8 to 9% over the past couple of years. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the 5-year trend of our major general fund taxes. And as Ms. Glusick alluded to earlier, you can see that many of our taxes have sort of leveled off, and they have very, very modest growth over the past 4 years or so, including sales tax, Measure C sales tax, and transient occupancy tax. Property tax continues to be robust and strong, as we talked about during our budget work session. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes our expenditure growth over the past 5 years. And as you can see, our expenditure is primarily driven by our salaries and benefits, and our pension costs continues to grow at a higher rate, greater than our revenue growth. You can see the vast majority of general fund dollars funds staff and benefits. Next slide, please. So this slide really depicts the impact on our reserves. And as you can see, the city has strategically used reserves over the past 20 years in times of financial distress, particularly during the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009, and then through some strong fiscal discipline was able to gradually return the reserve levels back to the red line, which is the target reserve policy. And then COVID hit early in 2020, where reserves were again utilized. The implementation of the American Rescue Plan Act did have a positive impact on our general fund and ultimately our reserves. And then as you can see in the current fiscal year 2024, we're projecting to have a deficit, and then again in fiscal year 25, another deficit. So again, this sort of shows our trend of our utilization of our reserves over the past 20 years and the need to continue to focus on replenishing reserves over the course of the next couple of years. With that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Glusick.
Sorry, I didn't want to cough into the microphone there. So here is the budget hearing schedule. This is also posted on the website, and Ms. Needle will show you where in just a moment when we do our demo. As you can see, we're about halfway through the process here. We are currently doing the budget introduction. We've also already had a number of meetings looking at rates and also work sessions to get input from council as to what the goals are for the coming year. Next week, we will be looking in full at downtown parking's rate restructure proposal, which will be very detailed. The week after that, we will be having a finance committee meeting where we will review the budget by department. At the finance committee meeting, the following week, we will have a regular city council meeting where we will go over the general fund, including the general fund capital and Measure C funds. On the 21st, we will go over in detail all of the other funds. So that is the enterprise funds, including airport, waterfront, golf, and also the special funds such as the self-insurance fund. After that, on the 4th is deliberations. And then after that, we will hopefully adopt the budget. You will see some post-adoption dates up there for rate hearings for water and wastewater. And the reason we included that is because they are important to this process. The timing of them this year is such that they fall after the adoption of those rates falls after the budget adoption. Next slide, please. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Needle, who will give you a quick demo of this year's online budget book.
Thank you, Ms. Glusak. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. I'm going to do a quick demo of the OpenGov platform where the online budget book lives. Currently, right here, we're at the budget homepage. You should all be familiar with this. I'm going to click on Plan for the Future. This is where the FY25 recommended budget lives. As you can see, here is our updated table of contents. It looks a little bit different than last year, with some improvements. You can see that every page is now linked here. There is also the new option for drop-downs for ease of navigation. Over on this side, we have the consolidated PDFs. So we have the fee schedules and we have the FY25 budget as a PDF. So I'm going to click into this. And this is where you have the option to download the online budget book as a PDF. You can click this download option here. I'm going to navigate back to the table of contents. We have some new sections. So here's our Explore Our Budget section where we have the budget process that Ms. Glusak just spoke about and the budget calendar. So I'm going to click into the budget calendar. And as you can see, here is a table with the meeting, the dates, and the agenda items. It also has the agenda report, the presentation, and the video link for you to go back and view as well. Going back to the table of contents, we have the budget message, which includes the city administrator's budget message. And we also have the general fund summary. This is a new page this year, which highlights the multi-year general fund forecast, revenue and expenditure overview and details. And it includes a section regarding the general fund reserves. All of the tables in the online budget book this year have the same columns as you see here. So we start with the FY23 actuals, then we have the FY24 projections, then we have 2025 from the 2-year approved budget, so last year's budget, and then we have FY25 from this year's recommended budget. Navigating back to the table of contents, underneath the budget message, we have the community profile, which highlights some of the council priorities, the organizational chart, the map, and a little bit about the city. Next, we have summary schedules, authorized position, and capital programs. This includes pages such as the citywide summary, the summary of revenues and expenditures by fund, a little bit more information about positions and the capital. Just like last year, we have it broken out by department. So each department has a summary page, which includes a list, which I'll click into the fire summary page for you. So the fire summary page includes its mission statement, a little bit of description about the department, and it lists all of the programs that the department is responsible for, with hyperlinks taking you to those specific pages. Scrolling down, we have a summary of the positions. Moving into the financial summary. This option, all these tables have a view report option at the bottom right-hand corner of the table. This will take you to the transparency portal. So I'm going to click that. It will open up a new tab. And we have the bar chart, very similar to last year. You have this is revenues, so you have the option to expand and give you a little more detail about each character code or object. Going back to the OpenGov summary page, if we keep scrolling, we get to the revenue and expenditure detail by fund, which again, you can click this view report option, which will take you to the transparency tool. We then have our core table, which has the 3 pillars of 2030. And finally, the department organizational chart. For this purpose, I'm going to click into program operations and suppression. And each program has a small description followed by their financial information. And again, that you have the option to view this report in the transparency tool. Just like last year, we have the translation available, so you can go up to the upper right-hand corner and select language. And it automatically translates the page on the spot. This translation will update the tables and the columns, the rows, and if you do navigate to any other page, the translation will hold. So, I can click back on the table of contents, and we can see that the translation has stayed as Spanish. And with that, I will pass it back to Mr. DiMartini.
So the staff recommendation for today, if you can pull up the presentation again, please, is to receive the city administrator's recommended operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2025, hear a report from staff in connection with the filing of the fiscal year 2025 budget, and approve of the proposed schedule of council budget review meetings and public hearings related to the mid-cycle budget update for fiscal year 2025. That concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from council members? Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. DiMartini, the thing I'm interested in mainly getting out in front of is the last meeting where everybody goes through, no, I want this, I want that, no, we don't have money, we do. So is there nowhere yet to find in this a narrative of how departments made their budget target? So are they having attrition of people? Are they cutting back on a program? Are they pushing out in the future maintenance costs, that type of thing? When and how would we see that?
Councilmember Jordan, so during the budget hearings that are scheduled for May 14th for the general fund funded departments, and then May 21st for the enterprise and the special revenue and all the other funded departments, the presentations that council and the public will hear on those days, we will itemize and list the specific expenditure reductions that departments have included in the recommended budget. And we will also indicate what potential service level impacts there may be because of that. And again, most of these, the vast majority of them, have already been included in the second year of the 2-year plan. So again, we will be focusing on those that may be in addition to. We actually found additional expenditure reductions by going through this thorough process this year as well.
And those would come out with Thursday agenda and staff report, and not on the Monday presentation slides. Would we have those out the week before for the public too?
Yeah, Councilmember Jordan, so we do issue a draft PowerPoint presentation to council members the Thursday before the city council meetings. And so council members can look forward to receiving that then. And then the presentation will be on that day where the public can receive that information.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Thank you for your presentation. I'm appreciating the updates and how this looks different, but looks the same, but with more detail. I had a question about slide 17. Find it here too. Yeah, so how does this red line expenditure projections, how do they compare from last year, what was presented? Is this the same red line for expenditures, or has it changed because of inflation, or how does it compare to last year?
Councilmember Snedden, thank you for that question. So the expenditure forecast has increased a little bit over the last year's projection, again, primarily due to the increased salary assumption increase from around a 3 to a 4% up to a 5.5%. Also, the known pension costs in fiscal year 2025 have gone up, mainly due to CalPERS's rate of return being lower than what was projected last year. And then also inflation is another factor. The second year of the plan assumed that inflation would come down a little bit more rapidly than it actually did. So I think we saw kind of across the board materials and supplies increases kind of still holding high.
Okay, thank you. So that answers that. And then the revenues line, how does it compare to last year's?
Councilmember Sneddon, so unfortunately they softened, so the line actually dipped a little bit. And so what we have been seeing in this current fiscal year is that our revenues are actually coming in pretty close to as we projected in the current fiscal year. And so the projections going forward, working with our tax consultants and other economic indicators, indicate that that sort of softening is going to kind of continue, not as necessarily robust as we were originally forecasting a year ago.
Okay. And kudos to you for your accurate projections of revenue softening. So the delta between those two is increased from what we had before. Okay. And then did you say that Measure C funds were going to get their own presentation, or is it fair to ask a question about that here?
Councilmember Sneddon, so staff is planning to present an overview of all of the projects that are slated to receive Measure C funding at the May 14th meeting. But if you have a specific question, we'd be happy to take it.
Well, just in terms of, are Measure C funds able to be expended, or do we not have enough staffing to expend Measure C funds, or just kind of the big picture status of the funds and how well they're able to be expended or not?
Councilmember Sneddon, I can speak to that briefly today. So for many of the projects that are funded through Measure C, staff has been able to expend those funds as planned. For example, our street maintenance, paving, sidewalk repair, many of those programs have been successfully able to spend that money down fairly rapidly. But we have had some construction delays with contracting, with our own staffing to be able to support many of those projects. So there are some projects that have experienced delay.
Mm-hmm. And then that's a follow-up question. And I remember last year there were some funds that would appear in these very detailed tables, but that maybe weren't planned to be expended until 2 years out or 3 years out. Has that been reconciled just in terms of the public-facing budget tool?
Yes, Councilmember Sneddon, staff believes that we've made progress in that area. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon with government accounting, to be perfectly honest with you. So for capital projects in particular, we have to have all of that appropriation up front before we let out a construction contract. And it may take 2 or 3 years to spend that money down. And so when you don't spend it all down, you have to carry forward that unspent appropriation into the next fiscal year. So in the tables, you will see in the fiscal year 2024 projected column expenditures that are higher than the adopted budget because of carrying forward that appropriation. So.
And is there a way to see that in the document? Is it called carryover or a different color, or is there any way to signal that?
Thank you, Councilmember Sneddon, for that question. At this exact moment, there is not. We are developing a table that will break it out so that you can crosswalk it across and see which portion of that is carryover amount.
Thank you. I think that'd be really, for myself, would be really, really helpful. And again, really appreciating the updates and just continuing to be more and more available. So then the other question I had, I just kind of continue to have this question, and it's about the core 3, and also from slide, and I realize this is Vision 2030 is already in place, but in slide 13, there are a lot of legs of the stool, and none of them address outright equity or service to the community. And then I was looking at fire's core 3s, not to pick on fire, but maybe these all say, but I think, does it fall under, and this is a question, is like, where do we look for that in the core? Is it under, I'm seeing maybe under organizational optimization, that services are delivered in a value-added manner or prioritizing community-based manner, but I guess I'm just overarching looking for where is a department sort of reporting on that, or whether we're calling it DEIA or IDEA or whatever we're calling it as a core value, sort of where will we be looking for that in these updates?
Councilmember Sneddon, thank you again for that question. I think that most of the IDEA, DEA, most of the metrics and the goals around that area is under the thriving workforce pillar. And so that's where our Human Resources Director, Ms. Levy, has spoken to that in previous presentations. And so what we can do is take that feedback back to our team, and then we can see if we can get some of that presented to council during the budget review meetings.
And is that internal to the organization, or is it outward facing to community services? I guess that's where I have that question, which maybe doesn't need to be answered right now.
Councilmember Sneddon, let us take that back and get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. DiMartini, and for all the tools that we have now available. It's a much different budget process than when we started here. When you put up the PDF earlier, I saw it was 316 pages, and that would have been a printed out copy and went to all of us. That would have been outdated before it even got to us. So to have it online is much more transparent, and appreciate all that. If you could pull up slide 18. Actually, I think it's 18. Sorry. Yeah, so we have, I'm going to talk I want to do a high level, and I don't want to get into downtown parking, but it relates to the last column here of the $7.1 million deficit, because I think it's important as we go into budget deliberations to understand there's a range in this budget deficit depending on what actions are taken. So that $7.1 million deficit, how does downtown parking play into that? And what I'm specifically asking is in terms of some of the things we're going to have to consider. If they don't meet the revenue projections or council doesn't take certain actions, what's the additional potential impact to the general fund?
Councilmember Friedman. The city administrator's recommended budget for fiscal year 2025 assumes additional revenue in downtown parking from the implementation of the proposed new fee structure. That will be discussed in detail next week at Finance Committee and then at the May 21st City Council budget hearing. So this general fund projection is predicated on downtown parking generating more revenue than what they would currently be able to produce if they do not make any changes. If we are not able to get the rate structure approved and we continue to operate as is, they will basically are projected to deplete all of their reserves by the end of next fiscal year and also go negative. And that would require general fund to subsidize the downtown parking operation. If that were to occur based on current projections, it would be close to approximately $3 million. Now, this budget assumes a transfer from the general fund into downtown parking based on the uncertainty around the implementation of the program.
And how much of in the budget that's part of the $7.1 million is the transfer that you just referenced?
Councilmember Freeman, it's $500,000.
So we're assuming already there's a $500,000 transfer into downtown parking. So I don't want to, we'll get into the whole downtown parking next week at Finance, and then we'll come back to council for more in-depth discussion. But the reason, again, that I wanted to highlight that is there's a range of the potential deficit from the 7.1 here to somewhere around 10 million, depending on how that is addressed. And that has major implications for a lot of what we may or may not be able to do for all the other departments. And then my next question is, if you could pull up slide 11. This is my final question, or there's a couple in here. So most of these are things that are out of our control in terms of rising expenditures, softening tax revenues, even housing element implementation, that's a requirement now, inflation. And so my question is, aside from reductions, which we already are doing, cuts in services, or potentially raising taxes in the long run, what are we doing as a city in terms of looking at strategic revenue enhancement opportunities or ideas? Because the way I read all this is that the revenues aren't going to be able to keep pace with the expenditures for a lot of things that are out of our control, such as inflation, pensions, et cetera.
Councilmember Freeman. So one core component of Vision 2030 is fiscal sustainability, and there is a dedicated working group called the Revenue Working Group that is solely focused on that area of figuring out ways to generate additional revenue from our existing revenue sources or find new revenue sources. And so there are a couple things that staff with council has already moved forward and approved. One is the cost recovery and revenue policy, and again, that's set as a guideline to evaluate our current fees that we charge, to determine what would be a sort of an optimal level of fee so that it is achieving a cost recovery desirable level. That has been implemented, and staff uses that as a guideline when proposing new fee changes. We have also initiated audits on transient occupancy tax and cannabis. Those audits are underway. And the whole goal there is to really ensure that we're maximizing the revenue from our existing revenue sources before we go out and potentially ask voters or ask council for new revenue. We also have a very extensive public outreach program going on right now with Essential SB. That is the preliminary work for understanding from the community what those essential city services are to determine funding for maintaining those services going forward.
Thank you. My last question, again, getting to maximizing revenues, is the short-term vacation rental enforcement program that we heard last week, where we got approximately $600,000 in back revenue. Where is that included in terms of being? Is it in the transient occupancy tax? Where is that in terms of revenue?
Yes, Councilmember Freeman, on slide 20, if you could please. That is included on the transient occupancy tax revenue line, that fourth one down from the top.
So without that, that would actually be lower. So that's a one-time, so it's not sustainable going, or it's not projected to have that $600,000 going forward since it was just one time.
Councilmember Freeman, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. With that, we'll go to public comment. 3 minutes to the dais. We'll start out with Margaret Coco.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and City Council members. My name is Margaret Crocco, and I'm Chair of the Library Advisory Board. Thank you for your continued support of the library, which is an essential service in contributing to literacy education, workforce development, adult education, youth engagement, and community sustainability, especially via the Library of Things that we heard a little bit about this afternoon in an earlier presentation. We understand that there are competing priorities for the city's budget. We also recognize your need to act upon these priorities within the context of budget constraints that can make it challenging to provide the city with the quality of services it deserves. I'd like to say a few words this afternoon about the collections allocation in the city's budget for the library. Over the last several years, the library has been asked to make budget cuts, and like other departments, it has done so. As a result, the collections budget has declined dramatically. In FY22, the collections budget was nearly $700,000. For FY25, the proposed collections budget is less than half that amount when ARPA, and only when ARPA funds are taken into consideration. The dramatic decline in the collections budget overall since 2018 has taken place within the context of rapidly rising prices. Inflationary pressures for purchasing hard copy books and leasing ebooks and audiobooks mean that even the current collections budget is not adequate and will be even less so once those ARPA funds are exhausted. To restore the purchasing power of the collections budget from FY22 would take approximately $750,000 today. I ask you to imagine what the library might be like in the very near future with ever-diminishing dollars for replenishing its collections materials. It's like imagining a food bank without enough food on the shelves to meet the needs of the city's undernourished population. We ask that City Council and City administrators work with library management to develop a long-term sustainable strategy for the collections budget. I trust that you agree that robust, up-to-date library collections are essential for maintaining the high standards and professional excellence of the Santa Barbara Public Library. Thank you, and thank you for all you do for the City of Santa Barbara.
Thank you. Barbara Cohen-Hirschberg.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. I'm President of the Friends of the Santa Barbara Library. Today, I want to speak on behalf of our library staff who experience on-the-job trauma on a regular basis. Librarians are becoming a frontline response to the people who are suffering from our inadequacies and failures as a society. As a city, we face a shortage of affordable housing, mental health, and substance abuse services. Many of the people that need those services frequent the library on a regular basis. Librarians are now taking on critical roles in assisting patrons in crisis or times of disaster. While the city has funded one social worker, it is not enough. Staff time and resources could be better spent if security were run internally rather than through a contracted security company. Because a company can't send the same employees each time, there is a lack of consistency and understanding of the culture of the library. There's a groundbreaking new study from Urban Libraries Unite. They dug deep into trauma that librarians experience and explained why it's happening. They propose 4 changes to help mitigate library staff trauma. Urban Libraries Unite received survey responses from more than 500 library staff, the majority working in urban libraries. They found that 68.5% had experienced violent or aggressive behavior at their libraries from patrons. They found that while 64% of libraries offer some sort of workplace mental health resource, only 20 respondents indicated they had used it. Many worried that using these resources might somehow get back to their managers and cause professional repercussions. In addition to direct confrontations with patrons and other staff, many responders mentioned what the survey termed secondary traumatic stress, known as compassion fatigue. They said, essentially, when we see our patrons struggle, we can take on a degree of that stress and eventually become burnt out. We witness our community members struggle through poverty, homelessness, drug abuse, mental illness, and sometimes we do not have the resources to help them. The study came up with 4 recommendations for trauma support. 1, starting a National Library Worker Helpline, a set of standards for healthy library work environments built by a coalition of library-led organizations, a collection of policies and procedures written from the perspective of trauma-informed leadership, and lastly, a series of peer-led support groups made up of library workers. The study likens these recovery groups where members could realize that they are not experiencing these problems alone. Thank you for your time and all you do.
Thank you. Lauren Trujillo.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. My name is Lauren Trujillo, and I am the Foundation Director of the Santa Barbara Public Library Foundation. I'm here today to share library joy and thank the city for maintaining support for the Santa Barbara Public Library for fiscal year 25 with ongoing security, parking, and continued 7-day-a-week service. We are beyond appreciative that this budget season priorities were set that align with maintaining and prioritizing the critical work of the library. But I urge you to do more as you go into evaluations this budget season. Maintaining is just a Band-Aid, and it is time to do better for Santa Barbara. We just celebrated National Library Week earlier this month, and we were honored to commence the week with a proclamation from the mayor. I want to share how just a few of those declarations are demonstrated by the library every day, and why we can't let these resources decline with status quo funding. The City of Santa Barbara declared, libraries are accessible and inclusive places that promote a sense of local connection, advancing understanding, civic engagement, and shared community goals. In 2024, SBPL's sustainability grant through the State Library has resulted in programming for all ages, including a new community garden plot on the east side, composting workshops, partnerships with the county, Explore Ecology, a tool lending library, and a Fix-It Fair happening in May. Hope to see you there. The City of Santa Barbara declared libraries are an essential public good and fundamental institution in democratic societies working to improve society, protect the right to education and literacy, and promote the free exchange of information and ideas for all library users. The library offers a variety of programs by and for the community. Every month, the Eastside Library, Spanish speakers have a well-attended book club that alternates with an equally well-attended crafting program held exclusively in Spanish. The City of Santa Barbara declared libraries continue to grow and evolve as essential and safe community spaces, extending far beyond the walls of a building, actively working to bring books, or collections, as we've heard today, and resources to those who need them most. SBPL's Library on the Go van continues to deliver library resources by reaching neighbors who face transportation challenges. Not only do they visit major community events like the Earth Day coming up, Juneteenth, and Farmers Market every Tuesday, they also have regular stops at senior living sites on the west side and on the Mesa. If you haven't seen the Shoreline Music and Movement visit yet, it's an incredible program and looks like a rock concert for toddlers. In the book Palaces for the People by Eric Kleinberg, that I'm sure you all have read by now, the author shares the accessible physical space of the library is not the only factor that makes its work well as a social infrastructure. The institution's extensive programming, organized by a professional staff that upholds a principled commitment to openness and inclusivity, fosters social cohesion. We ask the council to address the systematic and historic underfunding that our library faces. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers online for this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. And with that, we'll bring it back to council. Mr. Friedman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, once again, thanks to all our library folks. You're showing up. First of many meetings, I can already see you back up here, the same forces, and appreciate it. We could go back many years. But to Mr. DiMartini and your staff, thank you for really taking feedback from last year's deliberations and updating the transparency tool and the online budgeting process to make it even more transparent. I think last year, it was a work in progress. It was the first time that we'd done it that way, had those tools available. And of course, the first time you roll something out, you take the feedback and come in, and it was, there were some areas that were unclear, and you've provided more clarity. And I'm sure we'll get lessons learned this year as well and just continue to improve it every year as we should. So I appreciate that. And to all of our staff, thank you for all the work that you're doing to put in here. So with that, what I wanted to say was that as we're kicking this off and getting into the deeper discussions, the deficit is real. It's something that has been building, and a lot of it's out of our control in terms of costs that are on us from many different things, inflation, pensions that we discussed. One of the concerns that I have in this budget and the $7.1 million projected deficit for this year has to do with the downtown parking. And we're going to have a robust discussion on April 30th next week at Finance, and then we'll come back to Council. But this budget makes two assumptions: that the Council action will make changes to how downtown parking is implemented, which we haven't done yet. And then the second is that those changes would materialize into that revenue. And that is one where we won't know until we know. And I'm not particularly confident that with those changes that those would actually materialize into the budget. So for me, I'm starting this budget cycle under the assumption that that additional revenue is not coming in. And then depending on what the council does in terms of that $3 million and what we want to do with downtown parking, that will kind of shift. But I think it's prudent to look at the upper end of that range, which is $7.1 million to $10 million. Look at the upper end so that we set the proper expectation going into the budget deliberations for the council and for the public. And that's why I wanted to make sure that the media, the public understand that it's a range, and the 10 million is just as realistic as the 7 million. So one of the other things I do appreciate is that our staff is looking at other revenue enhancements so that we can change that curve so that the revenues more closely matches the expenditures in the long run. And so we'll be able to address things like library, police, fire, public safety, and all that. One of the things that I would like to request when we come back with the final budget is that we set up a council ad hoc committee. And this is not for tonight, but just as part of it, so we can discuss it at a later time, is a council ad hoc committee that focuses on revenue enhancements, a specific task, and then we would come back and report out. And so I'd like to put that at a future time, perhaps myself, Councilmember Jordan, Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez, but I think it's important that the council has an opportunity to discuss if an ad hoc committee might help us look at revenues in a certain way at a future time when we come back. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Well, to that I would say I think that's the Finance Committee, looking at revenue enhancements, but I guess that's for a different discussion for a different time. Overall, that threw me off a bit for a second. Thank you for the budget presentation, and I realize this is mid-cycle, and I really am appreciating the responsiveness to the confusion, questions, some of the discrepancies between what was presented department-wide versus the budget tool, and I'm anticipating that everything lines up this year, and I know you've spent a lot of effort on that, and I personally really, really appreciate those efforts, and applaud your work, really. I guess for overarching kind of goals, and I know it's mid-cycle, but I made similar comments at the beginning of the two-year cycle, so I'll say it here, that when we're looking at, and I understand this is somewhat inherited, the core objectives and sort of carrying through previously, but I really find that these three objectives and the legs of the stool are again sort of missing the heart of what we do as a city. And I will reference the Palaces for the People book that I am reading, and I'm finding it really revolutionary in a way that it's getting back to basics of core functions of city government, and so I continue to sort of miss that as a focus, and I think one of the places where we really came back to that on slide 14 is our cost recovery and revenue policy. We sort of have a policy about subsidizing some benefits over others based on communities' ability to provide those services for themselves or not, and I'll just keep making this statement that I really see the heart of what we do not highlighted in the same way that efficiency is highlighted. And I think as we're looking at efficiencies and where those revenues might be best spent, that, and then this is for my colleagues as well, for us to just be thinking about who we're serving and how we're serving the community also. And so, things like the swimming program that Councilmember Friedman applauded earlier, these kinds of things serving, and that falls in line with library comments or different comments as well. So just overarching statement on that I'm still really, I know it's finance and it's money and it's exact and to the dollars, but I know we all have a heart for the service to the community. I know you do. And I think I would really love over time to see that integrated in as well. And that's going to come up with the parking question also. Who has to pay to be able to come and enjoy downtown? And I think we'll save that for that discussion. But for this presentation for today, just really thank you for taking the time to make adjustments and to present those to us today. Really appreciate it.
All right, very good. Anybody with their hands raised online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion. We have one action item in this.
So move the staff recommendation.
Okay, that's item C. First by Friedman, second by Jordan. Can we have the roll call vote, please?
This is for item 8, the recommended action. Motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Jordan. Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye. Very good. Passed unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you to staff. We can move right on to item 9, unless you guys need to take a break, or are we good? Let's get her done. Ms. Turley, you fill out a speaker slip. Is this for your interview? Okay, I'm going to call you up with your group then when the time comes, if that's all right. Okay, very good. We're going to do our interviews now. Thank you for showing up. I'm going to ask that you keep your interview comments to 3 questions. Council members may or may not ask questions when you're done with your pitch. We'll start out with Arts Advisory Committee. Anyone here for Arts Advisory Committee? Hmm? What?
Architectural Board of Review.
Oh, I didn't get this on you. We should have these up here. So we'll do Arts Advisory Committee since we have you right here.
Okay, that's
And
fine.
then
I
we'll
can
go
sit
back
down
to
and come back.
Architectural Board
That's
Review.
not a problem. No?
No? Please identify yourself and go ahead.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Soheila Vali. I'm a new resident of Santa Barbara from another part of the country. And I'm intrigued by this opportunity to be a part of Art Advisory crowd, basically. I read about the job function, so I kind of understood what it is about, I think, anyways. As far as the recommended time, once a month is easy, that's doable, but I don't know how much extra time we are talking about to actually get anything done. So attending meeting is not a big deal, but how much time are we talking about? Maybe you guys can give me some feedback on that. As far as the idea why I want to do this, really, I'm interested in to be able to integrate into the city of Santa Barbara a little bit better at this level, so to speak. Again, I'm new around here. Just over a year ago, I moved here. So I'm interested to see the art community from this angle. I'm already participating at different levels with the art activities around town, with the City College, which is a great program. It's really almost unheard of anywhere around the country. Congratulations, guys. But also to be able to contribute maybe at a different level. I come from an oil and gas background, completely different. So I used to be a project manager. I know how to manage complex issues by dividing it into different little parts to be able to sort of manage different parts of it, interaction with different stakeholders, vendors, contractors, in this case, artists, etc. So I think that level of management of complex issues is my greatest attribute I can provide to the city. As far as art goes, I'm growing with it myself. I've always been involved with it, so it's nothing new, but as I'm in my retirement years, I'm having the best of time to actually allocate more time to it. And with COVID, gave me the opportunity to really delve into it big time. So I don't know what else you guys want to hear.
Well, that's fine. You don't have to take the full 3 minutes. Do you have any questions for this applicant? All right, well, thank you very much.
May I ask a couple of questions? May I ask a couple of
Yeah.
questions for the remainder? Is there any overlap between the art-related issues between the city and the county, meaning sharing resources with the county and the city, offices, spaces, activities, things like that? Or, that's one question. Second thing is, I've looked at the website for the city, but is there a specific website for the art community just dedicated to that?
Those may be questions that one of us can answer. There may, and maybe not. So, Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would recommend that you reach out to Sarah York Rubin.
Mhm.
She's the head of the county's Arts Commission,
Mhm.
and she could answer all those questions for you.
Okay.
Yeah, Sarah York Rubin.
Okay. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the Arts Advisory Committee? We'll go back to the Architectural Board of Review. Okay, the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals. Central Coast Commission for Senior Citizens. Civil Service Commission. Community Events and Festivals Committee, I know one of them's here. Mr. Perry?
Thank you, Mayor Roush, Council. I'm Roger Perry. I am coming back to reapply for one of the vacant seats with the Events and Festivals Commission. I've spent a number of years there working. I was asked to step down for a year and allow for new blood and to reapply, and I'm here to do that. Those of you who haven't known me in the past, I have been very, very involved in the city within the events community, whether Old Spanish Days, Solstice, Pony Baseball, my coaching endeavors. I like my outside life, goes well with my business life, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Perry?
And I beat my 3 minutes.
Did you, you said did you serve on this specific committee before? I know you've been involved in a lot of public events.
Yes, I have been here with the Events and Festivals Commission for a number of terms.
All right, very good. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Let's see, the County of Santa Barbara Library Advisory Committee. The Creeks Advisory Committee.
Mayor Roush and City Council, thanks for your time to assess my application for the Creeks Advisory Committee. My name is Todd Rulon Miller. I've lived in California for the last 50 years and the last 4 in Santa Barbara. I'd like to tell you about myself without any self-indulgence and then answer some of your questions. I was born and raised in March of 1951 outside Philadelphia. My parents instilled in me a rigorous acceptance and understanding of education and learning. I went to difficult K-12 schools academically. I was fortunate enough to attend and graduate from Princeton University in 1973. I lettered in varsity football, which was a major miracle for a 160-pound person at that time. I worked 3 jobs to help me get through college. I became global in my first job out of college, taking high school kids to Europe on tours. I learned a lot about culture, language, arts, mores, and customs before the internet. My first, as my mother would say, real job came to work for IBM Corporation in the 1970s, the then largest technology company in the world. It instilled in me a lot of process and policy. After that, for the next 20 years, I worked in smaller companies, even startups, 2 of which were noteworthy in that I worked for Steve Jobs for 6 years as his head of sales, who's a very distinguished entrepreneur in technology and a tough guy, which I learned a lot from. And also, I worked as a founder at Netscape Communications in the early 90s, a company you may recall which commercialized and really started the internet. And I was proud to lead a team that built a business from zero to $700 million in annual revenue in less than 30 months. Proud of that. After that, for the next 20 years, I've been a board member and advisor, acting CEO to over 30 companies in my business. I'm now retired from that. Giving back has been a central tenet in my life, changing to that. My charitable efforts have been interesting and fun. I worked directly with President Jimmy Carter at the Carter Center to help him raise money to fund his incredible programs to help try and save humanity. I've been on the board of directors of multiple schools, St. Paul School, my private school in New Hampshire, Kate School locally here in Carpinteria, Princeton University, and CU Boulder. Deeply invested in education and resources to make them successful. Currently, I'm on the board of 2 companies, charitables, Princetonians for Free Speech, my alma mater. We are non-ideological in our temperament. We are trying to teach students on campus civil discourse, free and fair debate. Now try that one out in this environment. But we're going to turn the tide on that, I'm sure of it. And I've been a treasurer on that board for 3 years. More relevant to this current appointment opportunity, I've been 5 years on the board of directors of CalTrout, which you may know to be a significant and large environmental company focused on California rivers and streams. 50 years in age, we now run a $30 million a year budget, which I help participate in and manage. Significantly, and I would call your attention to it, this past year and year now, we're knocking down 4 dams on the Klamath River in Northern California, which are extending over 200 miles of spawning river for salmonoid and steelhead, a population that used to be the 3rd largest fishing ground in North America, which is almost diminished to nothing. We're very excited about that. There are 60 other projects. We don't just do big, we do small all over. We are also working in a lot of Southern California projects. I could talk more about those as you'd like. I'm also a donor at Channel Keeper, a local environmental group, a donor at the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, where I will tell you, with love and affection, I've adopted a homeless man who's wonderful and incredible, by the way. Closing this out, I'm an avid fly fisherman. I've done that since 1967 through several hundred trips in the lower 48s, in Alaska and British Columbia. I love fish, I love nature, and I love water. And I'm a catch and release person. I've only killed one by accident in the last 50 years. I bring to you then, in final conclusion, as your questions ask, a few things I think I can bring.
Actually, we've gone quite a bit over time.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I would just say that I'd be honored to serve on that committee and help in any way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Sneddon has a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. So I was looking in your application, and then you mentioned CalTrout and restoration projects.
Yes.
And so I'm interested in, one, if you would see any conflict, are you still on that board or not? And then 2, why creeks? Why is your interest focused on creeks, if you could let
Yeah,
us know?
there's absolutely no conflict whatsoever.
Okay.
In fact, I've talked to CalTrout about this discussion. They would like to empower and bring resources to bear in items we might find in Santa Barbara. So there is no conflict. I've cleared that. And on creeks, I think they're the tributary and estuary of lots of things, both in nature, in fish, and in enjoyment. It doesn't have to be the big rivers like the Klamath Dam, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything else?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Anyone else for the Creeks Advisory Committee? Downtown Parking Committee? The Housing Authority Commission? I know there's one out there. Oh, there's a few out there.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and council members. My name is Lang Sly. I've been a Santa Barbara resident and downtown property owner for 15 years. I've been active in city affairs most of that time. I recently served 5 years on the Harbor Commission, and I have served for a long time and currently serve on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, which has some oversight responsibility for school bond expenditures. I strongly support the Housing Authority's goals of preservation and provision of affordable housing. I've walked around town and looked at some of the projects they've done over the years. It's very impressive, especially in the difficult environment of Santa Barbara, and I'd like to be part of that effort. My applicable background is I spent some years as a construction lender. I spent 20 years as a co-founder and president of a commercial real estate development fund, our company in Seattle. And I spent 10 years after that as director of West Coast acquisitions for a large pension fund, including oversight of management and leasing. So I hope to be on that commission and contribute whatever I can, and that's my story.
Thank you. Any questions for this applicant? Thank you very much. We're still going to be on Housing Authority for a while. Who's up next?
Good afternoon, Mayor Roush and council members.
You can pull that mic right down to you if you like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we start again? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Fenger, and I've been a resident of Santa Barbara for 51 years. And when I got here, it was really fun. It was Fiesta. And I was calling my bank to get a loan. I found a place I wanted to buy, and the bank was in, the bank was in Seattle, and I was here. So anyway, so there was a band playing, of course, and they said, "What's going on?" And I said, "They're so happy I'm here that they're playing for me today." Anyway, just a little humor. So I've been a senior commission for the Housing Authority of Santa Barbara for 4 years, and I'm reapplying for 2 more. When I got into this, we just hit COVID. I hadn't been in it very long, and COVID hit, and we were just doing everything by Zoom, and it was challenging. It was interesting but challenging. And so now we're finally out of that, and I've had a health challenge, and now I'm back, and I'm feeling really great. And so I want to continue with what I've been doing. I love the Housing Authority, and Rob Fredericks is the very best. The whole crew down there is just incredible. And I'm a resident of Villa Santa Fe, and I've been there for over 10 years, and it's just really wonderful. So I'm looking forward to continuing.
Very good. Well, thanks for the service, and thanks for sticking it out through COVID. Does anyone have a question for this applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up for Housing Authority.
Mayor Rouse, council members. I'll wait for the, great. My name is Megan Turley, and I'm before you as an applicant for the at-large position for the Housing Authority. I currently serve as the chair of the League of Women Voters Housing Committee and have been deeply involved in following the city's progress on our housing element and affordable housing goals. I've been the president of my HOA for the last 2 years and have 8 years of experience in nonprofit fundraising. So to a degree, I understand the raising and management of funds, as well as the realities of maintaining aging buildings. On a more personal note, I have a deep appreciation for the Housing Authority's work. In 2019, I was fortunate to have the opportunity for a soft landing when I lost my apartment in Santa Barbara, thanks to the availability of a sublet of an affordable unit in the El Zoco condominium complex, which is a deed-restricted property for moderate-income residents. The peace of mind and dignity that came with having a space of my own that I could afford on a nonprofit salary in Santa Barbara was invaluable, and thanks to this, I was able to save enough for a condo of my own, which is where I live now. El Zoco was developed by Homes for the People in 1993, utilizing funds from the now eliminated City of Santa Barbara's redevelopment agency. In 2021, the Housing Authority provided expertise and assistance to El Zoco in response to the urgent need for repairs to the over 30-year-old complex. Our Housing Authority's dedication to building affordable housing and maintaining existing properties is commendable and a necessary part of our community, and I'm impressed with the staff's ability to find creative solutions to fund new development, prevent foreclosures, explore adaptive reuse, pursue housing for local workforce through partnerships with school districts and private developers, and importantly, the permanent supportive housing that they provide to our residents with the greatest of needs. I would appreciate the opportunity to learn more about the process of funding and building affordable housing, especially now that the city has established the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I have spoken with 4 current commissioners, and I'm confident that I have the time and experience necessary to serve on this commission. So I respectfully ask for your vote to appoint me as a Housing Authority Commissioner.
Thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Turley?
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anyone else for Housing Authority? All righty. Go to Neighborhood Advisory Council. Rental Housing Mediation Board. Come on up.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and council member. My name is Scott Barish. I'm applying for the Rental Housing Mediation Board in the position of classification as a landlord. I've owned a home in Santa Barbara for the past 35 years. Lived in it up until about 3 years ago and now rent it out. And my wife and I now live in Carpinteria. A little bit of my background. I'm a USC graduate in 1981 and moved here to Santa Barbara in the early 80s. Actually was my first job as a social worker was with Family Service Agency in their child guidance clinic, and got my LCSW while I was working in Santa Barbara. But during that time, I also started to work with at that time, the Rental Housing Mediation Task Force, as it was called, under the late Sojourner Kincaid, and then also under Andrew Bufano. So I've been on the task force or the board in the past. More recently, let me tell a little bit about my employment history. I worked after FSA. I went to Ventura County, and I worked both in the crisis department of the mental health, but then I got a position with the Employee Assistance Program, and I was the director, the administrator of the Employee Assistance Program for about 30 years. During that time, I provided individual counseling to employees, and also provided substantial organizational support, which included continued mediation services for employees, both in terms of organizations, but also with employee to employee issues that we provided mediation for, and at times employee to supervisor issues, which we provided mediation for when it was required by the department. I retired from that position after 31 years, and at this point, I feel like back into a mode where I can continue to use the skills that I've acquired, and one of them is continuing to maybe go back onto the task force or the board after a 30-year absence. So, any questions?
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Any questions for this applicant?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else for the Rental Housing Mediation Task Board, or Mediation Board? Santa Barbara Youth Council. Let's see, Single Family Design Board. Sister Cities Board. Water Commission. Okay, what are you here for? Okay, come on up. I got one.
We'll get there
I
eventually.
know we're
right?
getting there eventually, yes.
I wasn't in a rush, though. I know how alphabetical order works. Anyway, hi to the mayor and the council. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Lindsay Cooney. I'm currently semi on the board. I meant to reapply during the fall period and missed the deadline, and I'm here. I'm currently the chair of the Water Commission. I'd like to remain on the Water Commission, and it's a really interesting position, as you guys know, those of you who come to some of those. Really interesting problems. The city has water infrastructure that we need to maintain. We have affordability issues that we need to think through. And obviously, having been a part of it for the last couple of years, I have a lot of background and knowledge on things that are currently happening, and I would like to remain a part of the city commission. And I talk too fast when I'm looking at a timer, so if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Ms. Cooney, could you highlight your expertise in water issues in your own professional background?
Sure. Yeah, so I have a master's degree from UCSB in like mechanical engineering and oceanography, or marine science, excuse me. So I have actually a lot of background in underwater acoustics, which isn't exactly water science, but obviously I have a big scientific background and I understand, water quality tests and all of those things. I also, in my job, I'm a consultant for manufacturing and engineering companies. I do a lot of contracts, I do a lot of rate setting, looking at prices, looking at how that impacts the bottom line. So yeah, I have a lot of scientific background and then a lot of like business background in the, side of like what do rates have to be, what does revenue have to be in order to remain like a solvent entity.
Very good. Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
You're good. All right, and that looks like it wraps up, unless you want to apply for something, but I guess that wraps up our interviews for this evening. We'll go to council staff communications and/or council member engagements. Anyone? Anybody engaging? No? Come on. Would you like to be engaged, Chris? Go right ahead.
Mayor Rouse, as many of us attended, I just really wanted to mention the Person of the Year luncheon of the Santa Barbara Foundation. It was very inspiring and uplifting, and I don't know, made me want to do more and be better. So I just wanted to highlight that.
All right, anyone else? Very good, and with that, we will adjourn at 4:41.